Splatoon is a fun game about 4v4 battles to see who can cover most of the stage in their ink. It's just a wholesome good time, right? Wrong. It may seem like a cute kids game on the surface, but underneath the bright colours and bopping music lies a dark history that can almost go unnoticed. You'd be forgiven for believing that this world was set in one of fantasy, and that the Inklings were always top of the food chain. However, this is not entirely true, and in order to explain, you need to go back in time. A time when humans once ruled the world. In the world of Splatoon, humans lived roughly 12,000 years ago. It's a long time, but while humans were quite advanced, having perfected things like cryogenic sleep, they were also incredibly ignorant. Climate change was a massive problem, and the scientists had warned the population that it would soon be too late to fix. As if to respond to the claims, the Earth began to be sieged by unpredictable floods and erratic volcanic activity. Despite this, humans chose to focus on their conflicts. With each technological advance, the destruction from the wars would increase, further destroying the climate at the same time. Some humans, seeing the planet would soon become uninhabitable, felt that the end was coming and decided to take measures against it. Some built a rocket called the Arc Polaris, loaded it with a variety of life from the planet, including humans, and sent it into space. Others created underground bunkers to shelter in what were dubbed domes. The biggest shelter was built on a crater under what was believed to be Mount Fuji. The only proof we have of this was a map of Incadia, released by the Splatoon developers. Now, being that far underground would mean that humans would never see the light of day again, so they devised a liquid based on the cephalopod's ability to change their color based on their thoughts and emotions. This enabled them to create screens that use less power than the average screen, and thanks to their desire to see the sky again, that's what it showed. How fresh! It was lucky that they were well prepared, because sooner rather than later, one country became tired of the constant struggle. In the ultimate temper tantrum, they decided, if we can't control it, no one can. In what they probably thought was the ultimate power move, they launched a nuclear warhead at Antarctica, melting it. Thus the reign of mammals came to an end, not with a bang, but with a flood. So what about the enterprising humans who fled underground? Well, of all the domes, only Alterna had any living humans in it. The other humans perished on their way to the domes, presumably caught up in the flood. This meant these shelters were never really used. Meanwhile, the larger shelter Alterna did have survivors living in it. They wanted to avoid making the same mistakes that occurred on the surface, so they elected the scientists to oversee the population. This was all well and good for a while, but eventually, the young people also began longing to see the surface. The elders warned them not to do it, explaining it wasn't worth it, but the young scientists didn't listen. They built a rocket in the hopes it would take them to the surface, but unfortunately, the rocket overloaded and exploded, destroying Alterna and its human inhabitants. And that explosion? It could be seen as the beginning of the Mollusk Age. This new age was kicked off by a war amongst the people of Alterna, a war that engulfed the entire world. This civilization was the last hope for humanity on Earth, but in the end, they ultimately died, leading to the extinction of humanity and the last of the mammals. Unfortunately, the essence of war didn't die with them, as the sea creatures that evolved into Inklings, Octarians, and the other sea creatures were influenced by humans in the strangest of ways. The special screens led to the evolution of the mollusk life forms first, and then eventually the rest of the sea life. These screens passed off to the desires of the Alternans who longed to see the surface, and this unfortunately led to history repeating itself. The Inklings, Octarians, and other sea life then settled down in the area known as Incadia. They founded the three cities of Inkopolis, Calamari Country, and the Splatlands. Unfortunately, living in peace wasn't going to be an option as the seawaters began to rise again, limiting the available land. This was especially an issue for the Inklings and Octarians as water would kill them, so going back to the ocean wasn't an option. Instead, the Inklings and Octarians began to participate in what was dubbed the Great Turf War. Although it is not expanded on, the other post-aquatic life sided with the Inklings in the war. This made it a much bigger threat to the Octarians, so they took it seriously. Very seriously. Big destructive weapons seriously. The Octarians consisted of not just their octolings, but also the strange reproductions that evolved from an octopus, but not an octoling. A better way to explain it would be that if an Octoling removed one of the tentacles, that tentacle would gain sentience and become its own being. The downside is these guys aren't that smart in comparison to the Octolings, as they're only able to follow basic instructions. The Octolings, however, were able to come up with incredible inventions, some of which were called the Great Octo-Weapons. They probably need not have bothered because records state the Inklings often slept in, unable to wake up early enough to defend themselves. The Great Octo-Weapons helped the Octarians gain a great advantage, and the Squid Break Splatoon was formed by Captain Cuttlefish to deal with the threat. This Splatoon was small, consisting only of Captain Cuttlefish, a horseshoe crab known as Moses Schellendorf, and Judd the Cat. Yes, you heard that right. Judd the Cat. There was the Professor, more on them later, who didn't want his precious cat to pass away, so he had him cryogenically frozen. Judd was discovered 2,000 years prior and released from his cryo chamber. As soon as he was released, he judged the first turf war and was well known for his accuracy. As for the other two members, Captain Cuttlefish was the captain of the Splatoon, and Osmosis would create blueprints for new weapons, including the famed Hero Shot. Creating weapon blueprints is something his grandson Sheldon does for the turf wars to this day. Despite this, the Octarians pushed the Inklings all the way back to their main stronghold with their great Octo-Weapons. Victory seemed all but assured for the Octarians, until a stroke of luck saw the cord powering the great Octo-Weapons accidentally unplugged. With the machinery unpowered, the Inklings and allies managed to overwhelm the Octarians, with Judd declaring it the Inklings' victory. Left with no choice, the Octarians retreated underground into the dome bunkers the humans had once planned to use, renaming them Octo Canyon and Octo Valley. Funnily enough, it seemed that the Splatlands managed to avoid this conflict completely thanks to the flood not affecting their area. This meant that everyone was able to live together rather peacefully. Despite this, turf wars still became a large part of their culture as well. My guess is that the competitive sport spread from Inkopolis after it became a popular pastime there. War is always a horrible prospect, but the fact that the loser would have to be forced to live underground or perish is awful. Anytime weapons are created with the intention to decisively win a war, it is made with killing many in mind. Add on to that the fact that the great Octo-Weapons were powered by the less intelligent Octarians. It is uncertain if these Octarians survived when the Octo-Weapons were defeated. It's also possible that the Octolings in the Octarian army weren't just obeying orders. In Splatoon 2, it's revealed that the eye gear that the Octarians were wearing in the original Splatoon was brainwashing them to obey DJ Octavio, their commander. In his attempt to overthrow Inkopolis to claim it for the Octarians, he fights Agent 3, the hero of the game. While they are fighting, the Squid Sisters, Inkopolis Plaza's premier idols and secretly Agent 1 and 2, sing Calamari Incantation. This music happens to override the brainwashing that DJ Octavio had planted in the Octolings. After that battle, several Octolings defected from the Octarian army and found their way to the surface. One of these is Marina, one half of the idol group Off the Hook, and we know that there are at least two other Octolings that also fled, one of which seems to wake up on a subway station. The Octoling, named 8 by Captain Cuttlefish, wakes up in the Deep Sea Metro, a special facility run by Kamabo Corporation, promising to bring inhabitants to the Promised Land. If this sounds suspicious to you, it's because it is. Very suspicious. Kamabo Corporation is the product of the AI commander Tartar, whose aim is less than safery. A creation of the Professor, as he's known in the Splatoon universe. The AI's original directive was to pass on the knowledge that humanity had accumulated to the next intelligent lifeforms that would appear. And while Inklings and Octolings technically fit the bill, Commander Tartar found the way that they fought and obsessed over fashion disgusting, and with that, he decided that a new directive was in order. In order to see his new directive reach its pinnacle, he needed samples, but not just any old samples, good ones. To reach that end, he created Kamabo Corp, and by extension, the Deep Sea Metro. It's under this guise that he tests the subjects, and the ones that collect the 4 Thangs will pass this test Tartar has set. Funnily enough, the Thangs are part of a blender which will be used to turn the successful entrants into primordial ooze. This ooze is an imperative part of Tartar's plans. You see, his new directive is to create the perfect race, one that will be deserving of the knowledge they would bestow on them, and Tartar is going to do that with a process called sanitation. Using the primordial ooze from the collected subjects, the plan is to sanitize the entirety of Inkopolis, turning them into the perfect species. There is a vague idea of what sanitizing does because the last Octoling that defected from the Octarian army, Oct, underwent the process. It's not known how or when, just that she was. Every enemy in the Octo expansion underwent the sanitation process, and while memory loss is a common symptom, it seems to also remove the user's will. A form of brainwashing, if you will. Octo expansion doesn't have the space to expand on this, but it is explained further in Side Order. One could even say that their antagonists are two mirror images of each other. Reports of Inklings in Inkopolis Plaza staring vacantly into space might be a clue that something weird is going on. Are these the sanitized Inklings that escaped the deep sea metro? Can't be. That was 5 years ago. It turns out that one of the members of Off the Hook, Marina specifically, felt terrible after experiencing the events of the deep sea metro and wanted to help in some way. As most of the sanitized inhabitants had their memories stripped, she created a digital space called the Memverse that would help search for these memories and collect them. The main area, Order Sector, is designed to look like Inkopolis Square but is devoid of color and inhabitants. It may have had color initially, but not anymore, as the AI Marina created, Order, had taken control of the Memverse and perverted her ideals into something quite deranged. Believing that its creator longed for a world of perfect order, Order began dragging people into the Memverse and removing their wills in a process called grayscaling. This would make everything the same every day with no change whatsoever. Just what Marina wanted. Not. When Order is told that this isn't what their creator wanted, it throws a tantrum and unleashes a mass grayscaling event. Commander Tata, is that you? Why can't these antagonists let people have nice things? If that wasn't enough, in Splatoon 3's Return of the Mammalians, Mr. Grizz wants to turn the inhabitants of the planet into mammals, whether they like it or not. Is that worse than stripping the denizens of their free will? Although it does seem that there may be some control somewhere, it's not explicitly explained. It seems the Splatoon universe is set on enslaving all their citizens, whether it be through brainwashing, reprogramming, eugenics, or just plain oppression. It's strange because when you watch the trailers or even the gameplay, there's no real mention of these things. As most of this information comes from the story modes and their expansions, people who exclusively play multiplayer would have no idea of the horrors that lie just beneath the surface of this colorful veneer. What does this mean for the future of the series? Is the next entry going to continue following this trend of enslaving all squid manity? And will we learn more of the life before the rise of the Inklings and Octolings? We'll be sure to dive into the Splatoon lore once the next game releases. But until then, if you'd like to hear us talk more about Splatoon's lore, or any other Nintendo game's lore for that matter, be sure to let us know in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss out on new videos.